A few drill reports, and a risk that few miners would dare to accept were the initial components. Schnabel in Parkish. He was already well versed in the Yukon when he was confronted with an offer he couldn't refuse. There was talk about Dominion gold resources. Their houses, all of the heavy equipment, and the entire camp were part of it. The total cost was $15 million. That was more than just a business choice. It was a daring jump from a height with no guarantee that the parachute would open. It was just a dream. Pull out 5,000 ounces of gold. However, the truth was that a knife fight in the cold dirt was in store. There was more to Dominion Creek than meets the eye. Spanning an expansive 7,500 acres, this territory held significant name in the Yukon. Rumors had circulated throughout mining camps for decades regarding the secrets concealed under the ice surface. The old people talked about foolish riches that may transform a miner's life in the span of a season. There might be as much as 80,000 ounces stashed away underground, according to some estimates. Over $160 million in an unimaginable windfall. However, there was invariably a catch. The precious metal wasn't just sitting there, ready to be plucked out. The ground was so hard from the freezing that it might as well have been solid rock, and it was 40 tons below. It required more than just effort to get there. There was fighting. Each misstep by the shovel was an assault on the permafrost, which had resisted disclosure of its secrets for countless years. Dominion Creek made it clear from the start that it would not be an easy road. The tailings, or mounds of dirt left behind by miners who have long since departed, were at first the only source of hope. A sign of swift winds would be the presence of any remaining gold particles on those mounds. Defrosting layers of frozen overburden wouldn't be necessary. At this very moment, I will not make that choice. No matter who handles it, I expect it to be challenging. Quite a bit of effort is required up there, you know. It would have been easy to scoop, process it in the factory, and perhaps the wager would have paid off. However, the Yukon may bring even the most daring people to their knees. The allure of effortless wealth vanished as the monotonous misery of setback after setback took its place. The teeth on the bucket of an excavator first came loose and broke off like shards of bone. Then, as if in response to cue, a hydraulic line burst, releasing an oil mist that scorched the cut. There was a domino effect of failures. Engines that were supposed to make a deafening racket instead remained muted. Everything came to a halt as soon as the machines ceased operating. Nothing washed up from the ground, no soil was moved, and no money was made. Just as quickly as time passed, Parker's funds began to dwindle. With no improvement in sight, the calamity scales continued to tip. The prospect of good fortune was plausible for a minute. It seemed like disaster was looming on the horizon the next. It was felt by the crew. The ebb and flow of two souls was like a roller coaster. A hopeful cleanup one week prompted jubilation and mirth. Silence fell over the camp as Sellen's next move instilled doubt in everyone's mind. Did they go after phantoms? Had the gamble been a bust from the start? They were all stumped. For a long time, Parker Schnabel relied heavily on one machine, Great Red. It was the foundation of his business. It was a washing plant that consistently made a profit. Trustworthy, well-known, and seems an integral part of the team. Dominion Creek, however, was completely new to Parker. There was more pressure, more frozen ground, more high expectations, and all of a sudden Big Red wasn't enough. As a result of Dominion's demands, the aging facility began to struggle. Small problems at first, and later major ones. Cracks! There was an accumulation of breakdowns, tension bars cracked, and critical components were down. More and more riches was sliding through their fingers with each failure. Parker then made a move that caught everyone off guard. For the time being, he departed from the Yukon and traveled to New Zealand via aeroplane. While his fellow miners remained rooted in their claims, Parker sought guidance from some of the most forward-thinking operators on the planet. The things he discovered resembled machines from a distant future. Sturdy machines, simplified layouts, and ideas that changed the way he thought about mining. Among the machines, one stuck out. An aquatic wash plant that swam across ponds, collecting paid dirt and processing it on the go. Unlike anything Parker had encountered before, it was both powerful and efficient. However, the Yukon is not a pond. Unpredictable, rough, and rocky was Dominion Creek. Despite its futuristic grandeur, the landscape Parker was fighting couldn't withstand that big. He didn't find it to be the solution. Hence, PA devised his own plan rather than acquiring an existing one. 2 years of dogged persistence followed. Beams of steel were welded into position. A stunning blue was painted onto massive components. The machine started working again, little by bit. This was no ordinary wash facility. It was an even riskier bet, with $1 million riding on top of $15 million. They gave it the name Roxanne. Consequently, we tweaked Roxanne a bit. That name is really sweet. Changed the amount of water and the rate of feeding. Even while it was a lot of fun, it was difficult since, for example, Roxanne didn't appear to be a machine when it finally came into view. A rescuer, it seemed. After months of disappointment, the crew saw optimism rekindle as the ground gave something back on its maiden run with Roxanne roared to life. 56 ounces of gold in just one wash. The camp erupted in laughter once more. Dominion Creek wasn't finished fighting, but it finally felt like the risk may pay off. The fissures became apparent almost instantly. Everything went dark because of a dangling wire. Afterwards, work came to a standstill as a water hose burst, sending frigid water all over the site. Fatigue set in as the days passed, and it became clear that the dream machine hadn't been bulletproof all along. The 5,000-meter mark became further and further away with every delay. Even though Roxanne had given them reason to be hopeful, the curse of Dominion remained unsolved. At this time, no. The ground finally gave something remarkable after weeks of disappointment, breakdowns, and frustration. It weighed 41.80 grams. It was a victory deserving of celebration by any measure. Its weight was not the actual shock, though. That was its form. This piece of metal wasn't your typical circular hunk dug out of old channels or rivets. An unusual shape with edges and spreading arms gave it an almost lifelike appearance. Due to its dendritic pattern, the creation resembled a miniature, like a lightning bolt frozen in midair or a golden tree. The team was in astonishment as they peered at it. The weight of a piece of gold is said to be its purity. However, attractiveness changed the game here. In the world of collecting, ounces aren't everything. For shapes that are unusual, let alone minute, they pay a premium for originality. A certain enchantment was carried by this electrified nugget, as it was called by a coup. There was an immediate change in tone. Finally, after all those failures, Dominion Creek had shown something remarkable. Almost like a message was meant for Parker and his crew. That was more than a nugget. It proved it. Evidence that the Earth contained valuable resources that were worth battling for. The Yukon, however, had more surprises in store. A seemingly insurmountable barrier soon presented itself to the crew. A large rock stuck between them. Far too large to safely transport, and far too heavy to do so without wasting time. It appeared as a wall blocking their way and seemingly daring them to attempt. Anger was palpable at first. Until then, though, an oddity was noted. The surface was adorned with shimmering yellow streaks. Golden threads winding their way through solid rock. The boulder suddenly stopped being an obstacle. A vault it was. The group worked painstakingly to crack it open. Knowing that something valuable could be within, each hit is measured and cautious. As soon as it snapped, all movement in the cut ceased. A solitary enormous nugget was concealed within the stone's core. Not in the form of dust, flakes, or a handful of little pieces, but as one enormous chunk of gold. 100 pounds was its weight. Just one nugget with a value of $200,000. A tantrum broke out in the assembly. Miners fantasize about this type of discovery their whole lives after days of machines breaking, money leaking out, and spirits disintegrating. It seemed like a dream, a jackpot so unusual. The nugget had to be broken apart by the crew in order to escape its stone prison. The solid component broke into multiple pieces as soon as they did this. There was still gold. While the item's weight and worth remained unchanged, the one-of-a-kind quality and immutability of a single undamaged specimen had vanished. Parker's crew had hit the jackpot in a way that very few people ever do. Dominion eventually brought up its harsh balance again. Good fortune seldom comes cheap. Tall figures appeared as the last rays of a lengthy Yukon summer dwindled and the machinery finally became silent. Even though it wasn't the $5,000 fantasy Park had bet all on, the final tally of $77,381 in gold was sufficient after months of failures, repeated repays, and a bet that nearly broke them. Not a desert, but enough to make the crew remember that Dominion Creek wasn't quite that. Just enough to show that the $15 million bet wasn't a bust. Something concrete and genuine had been bestowed upon them by the earth. Yet that season was not without its wounds. The machinery had broken down. We had wasted time. A once-in-a-lifetime gem had broken into fragments. Every obstacle was significant in its own way. But there was one indisputable fact that it all led to. There was gold. The season's accounting wasn't merely a financial statement for Parker.